Ryan Walker barely slept the night before construction began. Every few hours, he found himself looking out the bedroom window, thinking about how different his life would look in a few months. For nearly 6 years, he had saved almost every extra dollar from his engineering job. Vacations were postponed. Luxuries were avoided. Every sacrifice had been made for one reason: to build the home his father had dreamed about before passing away. That dream started almost 20 years earlier. Ryan still remembered standing beside his father on the empty piece of land as a teenager. His father had smiled while pointing across the open field. One day, he had said, "Our family will build a home right here." Unfortunately, illness took that dream away before it could become reality. Standing on that same land now, Ryan silently promised himself that nothing would stop him from finishing what his father had started. The morning air was cool as contractor Daniel Reed arrived with a convoy of construction vehicles. Excavators, concrete trucks, pickup trucks, and trailers carrying lumber slowly filled the property. Workers greeted Ryan with smiles. "Congratulations," one of them said. "Today's the beginning of something special." Ryan smiled back. "It definitely is." Daniel walked over holding a clipboard. "Everything is ready. County inspections passed yesterday. Utilities are marked. Foundation layout is complete." Ryan looked across the land. For the first time, he could actually picture his future home standing there. Daniel raised his hand toward the excavator operator. "Let's get started." The massive machine slowly lowered its bucket toward the ground. Then, a loud horn interrupted everything. Every worker turned. 5 white luxury SUVs entered the property without permission. They drove straight across the gravel access road before stopping directly in front of the construction equipment. The driver's doors opened almost simultaneously. A woman wearing an expensive Navy business suit stepped out confidently. Her name was Rebecca Collins. Everyone in town knew exactly who she was. For years, she had served as president of the Oak Ridge Homeowners Association. She had built a reputation for aggressively enforcing HOA rules, often pushing residents into expensive legal battles over minor issues. This time, she appeared more confident than ever. Without introducing herself, Rebecca walked directly toward the excavator and raised one hand. "Turn that machine off." The operator looked toward Ryan instead. Ryan slowly walked forward. "Can I help you?" Rebecca removed a folder from under her arm. "Actually, you can." She looked around the construction site before speaking loudly enough for every worker to hear. "This construction project is officially suspended." The workers exchanged confused looks. Daniel frowned. "Suspended by who?" Rebecca answered immediately. "The Homeowners Association." Ryan couldn't help smiling. "I'm sorry, what?" Rebecca opened her folder. "This property now falls under HOA authority." Ryan stared at her for several seconds. "I think you've come to the wrong address." Rebecca shook her head. "No, this land belongs to our community development." Ryan laughed. "It belongs to me." He walked toward his truck and returned carrying a thick blue binder. Inside were copies of every important document connected to the property: land deed, county survey, property tax records, environmental approval, construction permits, engineering reports. Ryan handed everything to Rebecca. "Take your time." Rebecca flipped through only a few pages before closing the binder. "These documents don't change our position." Ryan folded his arms. "They don't need to. They prove ownership." Rebecca calmly replied. "The HOA disagrees." Daniel couldn't believe what he was hearing. "You can't disagree with a registered property deed." Rebecca ignored him completely. She pointed toward the workers. "Everyone needs to leave immediately." Nobody moved. Ryan looked at every member of his construction crew. "Continue working." Rebecca's expression immediately changed. "I said stop." Ryan answered calmly. "And I said continue." The excavator engine started again. Rebecca quickly stepped directly in front of the machine. The operator immediately shut it off. "Stay in sight. This is getting ridiculous." Rebecca pulled out her phone. "If construction continues, I'll have every worker removed." Ryan smiled. "Removed from my own property?" Rebecca nodded confidently. "Exactly. Several nearby neighbors had gathered along the roadside after noticing the growing argument. Many began recording with their phones. Rebecca noticed. No recording. Ryan smiled again. This is private property. She looked around. I don't consent. Ryan replied. You don't have to. The crowd grew larger. Whispers spread through the neighborhood. What happened? Why is the HOA here? Does she really own the land? Rebecca realized public attention wasn't helping her. She immediately called the HOA's private security company. 20 minutes later, 2 security vehicles arrived. Their supervisor introduced himself before approaching Ryan. Sir, we've been asked to remove everyone from this construction site. Ryan politely handed him the property deed. The supervisor spent nearly 2 minutes reading every page. Finally, he looked back toward Rebecca. Ma'am, this property appears to belong to Mr. Walker. Rebecca frowned. The HOA disputes those records. The supervisor looked uncomfortable. With respect, I can't remove someone from land they legally own. Rebecca's patience finally disappeared. Fine. She crossed her arms. I'll call the sheriff's office. Ryan nodded. Please do. Nearly 40 minutes later, Sheriff Michael Grant arrived. Unlike everyone else, he refused to take sides immediately. He first spoke with Rebecca. She confidently claimed Ryan was trespassing and illegally constructing a home inside HOA-controlled property. The sheriff listened carefully before walking toward Ryan. May I see your paperwork? Ryan smiled. I've been waiting for someone to actually ask. He handed over the same blue binder. Sheriff Grant carefully reviewed every page instead of glancing through them. He checked permit numbers, survey maps, county seals, tax receipts. Finally, he stepped away and made a short phone call to the county land records office. Everyone waited in complete silence. Even Rebecca looked nervous now. After several minutes, the sheriff returned. He closed the binder, then looked directly at Rebecca. I've confirmed the county records. A long pause followed. This property legally belongs to Ryan Walker. Several construction workers quietly smiled. Rebecca immediately protested. The HOA has authority. Sheriff Grant interrupted her. Not here, but the county has never transferred this property into HOA jurisdiction. Rebecca's confident smile slowly disappeared. The neighbors watching from across the road began whispering. Ryan thought everything was finally over. He was wrong. Rebecca stepped closer and lowered her voice so only Ryan could hear. You may have one today. She smiled coldly. But I promise you, that house will never be built. Ryan watched as Rebecca climbed into her SUV. One by one, the other vehicles followed. The convoy disappeared down the road. Daniel walked beside Ryan. I don't like the look she gave you. Ryan kept staring toward the empty road. Neither do I. For reasons he couldn't explain, he had the feeling that today's confrontation wasn't the end of the fight. It was only the beginning. Rebecca Collins drove away that afternoon, but Ryan Walker couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that her final words were more than just a threat. As the construction crew packed up for the evening, contractor Daniel Reed walked over and quietly admitted that something about the entire confrontation didn't make sense. Rebecca hadn't acted like someone enforcing community rules. She had acted like someone desperately trying to stop the project at any cost. Ryan tried to stay positive, reminding himself that the sheriff had confirmed he legally owned the property. The county permits were valid, the land deed was authentic, and there was no legal reason construction couldn't continue. Still, as he looked across the empty lot before leaving for the night, he couldn't ignore the feeling that someone was watching. The next morning, construction resumed as if nothing had happened. Workers poured concrete into the foundation trenches, while others assembled steel reinforcement bars. The atmosphere was cheerful again, and everyone believed the worst was over. Around lunchtime, Daniel approached Ryan with a concerned expression. We're missing 6 pallets of concrete blocks, he said. Ryan frowned. The delivery receipt clearly showed they had arrived the previous evening. They searched the entire property, but the materials had completely disappeared. At first, Ryan assumed someone had made a delivery mistake, but the supplier confirmed the shipment had been unloaded correctly. Thousands of dollars worth of materials had simply vanished overnight. 2 days later, another strange incident occurred. As workers prepared to operate the excavator, the machine refused to start. The mechanic inspected it and quickly discovered that someone had intentionally cut several electrical cables under the engine cover. It wasn't accidental damage. It had been carefully planned. Repairs took the entire day, costing Ryan valuable time and money. That evening, Daniel shook his head in frustration. "This isn't bad luck anymore," he said. "Someone wants this project to fail." Ryan agreed. Every problem seemed designed to delay construction just long enough to increase expenses. Missing supplies, damaged equipment, broken plumbing lines, and mysterious tire punctures began happening almost daily. None of the workers had seen anything suspicious, yet someone always managed to enter the property after dark. 3 nights later, Ryan received another phone call from Daniel just after sunrise. "You need to get here immediately." Ryan raced to the construction site. The moment he arrived, his heart sank. Fresh concrete that had been poured the previous afternoon had been completely destroyed. Deep tire tracks covered the surface, and someone had driven a heavy vehicle across the foundation before the concrete hardened. Months of planning had been ruined in a single night. Nearby, spray painted across a temporary plywood wall, were 6 chilling words. "This land will never be yours." Several workers stood silently staring at the message. Daniel clenched his fists. "This has to stop." Ryan looked around the property. Whoever was responsible clearly wasn't afraid anymore. They wanted him to see the damage. They wanted him to quit. Instead of giving up, Ryan made a different decision. "If they're coming back," he said quietly, "we're going to catch them." That afternoon, Ryan purchased a professional surveillance system with night vision cameras, motion sensors, and cloud recording. Together with Daniel, he spent hours hiding cameras inside birdhouses, utility poles, trees, temporary fencing, and construction equipment. Every entrance to the property was now under constant surveillance. Not even the workers knew where every camera had been installed. Ryan wanted whoever was responsible to believe the property remained unprotected. For 3 nights, nothing happened. The cameras recorded nothing except deer wandering across the field and the occasional passing vehicle. Then, shortly after 2 a.m. on the 4th night, Ryan's phone vibrated. Motion detected. He immediately opened the security app. His heartbeat accelerated. 3 black pickup trucks had stopped outside the construction site. Several masked figures climbed over the fence carrying crowbars, bolt cutters, and baseball bats. Ryan quickly called Daniel. "They're here." Within minutes, both men were watching the live camera feeds from Ryan's living room. The intruders moved with confidence, as though they had done this before. One person smashed the windows of a parked excavator. Another poured sand into the fuel tank of a generator. 2 others destroyed stacks of lumber using sledgehammers. Then one of them spray painted another message across the construction trailer. "Leave now or lose everything." Ryan watched in disbelief. "This isn't vandalism," he whispered. "It's intimidation." Suddenly, one of the masked individuals pulled his hood back for just a few seconds. The security camera captured his face perfectly. Daniel froze the video. "I know him." Ryan leaned closer. "So do I." It was Mark Benson, one of Rebecca Collins' closest HOA board members. Ryan couldn't believe what he was seeing. The board member wasn't simply attending HOA meetings. He was participating in criminal vandalism. Before leaving, another masked person accidentally dropped a folder onto the ground while climbing back over the fence. The trucks disappeared into the darkness. Neither Ryan nor Daniel moved. For several seconds, they simply stared at the screen. Finally, Daniel spoke. "We have them." Ryan nodded. "Not yet." The next morning, they returned to the property before the workers arrived. Near the damaged fence, Ryan discovered the folder that had fallen during the escape. Inside were printed maps of his property, construction schedules, equipment delivery dates, worker arrival times. Someone had been tracking every movement on the construction site. At the very bottom of the folder was something even more disturbing. A confidential document titled, "Oak Ridge Expansion Proposal." Ryan frowned. He had never heard of it. Most of the pages contained property maps with several nearby lots highlighted in red, including his own. Handwritten notes filled the margins. "Acquire before highway approval." Delay construction until ownership transfer. Increase HOA boundary. Ryan stared at the papers. This isn't about neighborhood rules. Daniel looked equally shocked. They're trying to take the land. Ryan immediately contacted attorney Olivia Brooks, one of the most respected property lawyers in the county. Less than an hour later, she arrived at the construction site carrying a legal briefcase. Ryan showed her the surveillance footage first. She watched every second without interrupting. When Mark Benson's face appeared on the screen, Olivia paused the video. Zoom in. Ryan enlarged the image. Olivia slowly smiled. Crystal clear. She then reviewed the maps found inside the folder. The more pages she turned, the more serious her expression became. This changes everything. Ryan looked confused. What do you mean? Olivia placed the papers on the hood of her car. Rebecca never wanted to enforce HOA rules. Ryan waited. Olivia pointed toward one of the highlighted maps. Your property sits directly beside the route of a proposed commercial highway expansion. Ryan frowned. I've never heard about that. It hasn't been announced publicly. She turned another page. If this project is approved, your land value could increase 5, maybe 10 times. Daniel looked stunned. So Rebecca is trying to stop construction until... Olivia finished the sentence. Until they find a way to gain control of the land. For several moments, nobody spoke. Everything finally made sense. The fake notices, the threats, the vandalism, the constant delays. None of it had been about the appearance of the neighborhood. It had all been part of a carefully planned strategy. Ryan slowly looked back toward his property. They're willing to commit crimes, just to steal this land. Olivia nodded. And now we can prove it. She carefully placed every document into an evidence bag. We're taking this to Sheriff Michael Grant. But we're not stopping there. Ryan looked at her. What do you have in mind? Olivia smiled confidently. We're going to let Rebecca believe she's winning. Ryan raised an eyebrow. Why? Because people like Rebecca only make mistakes when they think no one can stop them. And when she makes her biggest mistake, Olivia closed the evidence bag. We'll expose everything in front of the entire town. Ryan looked across the damaged construction site one more time. For the first time since this nightmare had begun, he wasn't thinking about defense anymore. He was thinking about justice. And somewhere across town, completely unaware that her secret plan had been discovered, Rebecca Collins was already preparing her next move. She had no idea that the trap she had carefully set for Ryan was about to close around her instead. Ryan Walker barely slept after discovering the documents hidden inside the abandoned folder. Every piece of evidence pointed to one terrifying conclusion. Rebecca Collins had never been trying to enforce HOA rules. She had been running a carefully planned operation to gain control of his property before its value skyrocketed. The surveillance footage, the construction schedules, the marked property maps, and the handwritten notes all fit together like pieces of a puzzle. For weeks, Ryan had been fighting what he thought was an unfair HOA dispute. Now he realized he was facing something much bigger, a conspiracy driven by greed. The following morning, Ryan, Daniel Reed, and attorney Olivia Brooks met Sheriff Michael Grant at the county courthouse. They spent nearly 2 hours reviewing every video, photograph, damaged invoice, and document recovered from the construction site. The sheriff remained silent as he watched the security footage showing masked vandals destroying Ryan's equipment. When Mark Benson removed his mask for a few seconds, Sheriff Grant paused the video and leaned closer to the screen. That's enough for probable cause, he said. Olivia then placed the Oak Ridge expansion proposal on the table. She carefully explained how the documents suggested the HOA had been attempting to delay construction until they could somehow force Ryan into giving up his land. The sheriff immediately contacted the county investigator's office and requested a formal investigation into the HOA's activities. Within 48 hours, investigators executed search warrants at the HOA office. What they found shocked everyone. Hidden inside filing cabinets were confidential emails, financial records, private meeting notes, and dozens of maps showing neighboring properties marked for future HOA expansion. Ryan's land was circled several times in red ink, with handwritten notes reading, highest priority and prevent construction at any cost. Investigators also uncovered emails exchanged between Rebecca Collins and several board members discussing ways to create financial pressure on Ryan. One message suggested delaying construction long enough that Ryan would eventually run out of money and be forced to sell the land below market value. Another message instructed board members to increase neighborhood complaints and create as many legal obstacles as possible. The evidence was overwhelming. News of the investigation spread throughout the town almost immediately. Local television stations parked outside the HOA office. Reporters interviewed frustrated homeowners who described years of intimidation, unnecessary fines, and constant threats from Rebecca's administration. Residents who had once admired Rebecca now began questioning everything she had done. Meanwhile, Rebecca refused to admit defeat. Instead, she announced an emergency HOA community meeting, claiming she would set the record straight. The meeting quickly became the largest gathering the neighborhood had ever seen. Every chair inside the community center was occupied. Dozens of residents stood along the walls. Television cameras lined the back of the room. Rebecca confidently walked onto the stage wearing the same calm expression she always displayed during HOA meetings. She adjusted the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, recent accusations against this association are completely false. Certain individuals have chosen to attack the HOA because they refuse to follow community standards. Several people nodded. Rebecca continued, "We have always acted in the best interests of our residents." Just then, the back doors slowly opened. Every head turned. Ryan Walker entered the room alongside Daniel Reed, Attorney Olivia Brooks, Sheriff Michael Grant, county investigators, and 2 deputies carrying large evidence boxes. The room fell completely silent. Olivia approached the stage. "Mrs. Collins," she said calmly, "before this meeting continues, we'd like to share something with the community." Rebecca laughed. "I don't believe this is the appropriate time." Olivia smiled. "I think it's the perfect time." A large television screen was rolled into the center of the room. Sheriff Grant nodded toward the technician. The lights dimmed. The first video began playing. The audience watched in complete silence as several masked individuals climbed over Ryan's construction fence. They saw expensive machinery being destroyed, building materials smashed, threatening messages painted across walls. Then, Mark Benson removed his mask. Gasps echoed throughout the room. Rebecca's confident smile disappeared. The second video appeared. This time it showed Rebecca standing near the construction site during an earlier confrontation. Although she didn't know she was being recorded, her voice was perfectly clear. "If delaying construction isn't enough," she said in the recording, "we'll find another way to stop him." The audience erupted. People stood from their seats. Several homeowners began shouting questions. "What does that mean? Why would you say that?" Rebecca tried speaking over the crowd. "Those recordings have been edited." Olivia immediately placed certified forensic reports onto the table. "They've been verified by county investigators." Rebecca's face turned pale. The videos weren't finished. Next came copies of confidential HOA emails, then photographs of the secret expansion maps. Finally, the Oak Ridge expansion proposal appeared on the screen. Olivia explained how the documents proved Rebecca had secretly attempted to expand HOA authority so the association could eventually control millions of dollars worth of valuable land. Ryan's property had been the first target. The room exploded with anger. Residents who had supported Rebecca only minutes earlier now demanded her resignation. Several former board members stood up one by one. One admitted that Rebecca had pressured them into approving fake violation notices. Another confessed that he had witnessed discussions about delaying Ryan's construction project. Mark Benson lowered his head. "I was wrong," he quietly admitted. "I should never have participated." The confession stunned the audience. Rebecca looked around the room, searching for support. There was none. Everyone had turned against her. Sheriff Grant slowly approached the stage. "Rebecca Collins," he announced, "you are under arrest for conspiracy, fraud, criminal vandalism, obstruction of justice, and directing organized property damage." The entire room watched as deputies placed handcuffs on the once powerful HOA president. For the first time in years, Rebecca Collins had nothing to say. As she was escorted past the residence she had intimidated for so long, nobody applauded. Nobody celebrated. They simply watched in silence as the woman who believed she was above the law walked out of the building in handcuffs. Over the following months, the investigation continued. Several additional board members accepted plea agreements and cooperated with prosecutors. The corrupt HOA leadership was officially dissolved. A new community association was later formed with strict transparency rules, elected leadership, and financial oversight to ensure such abuse could never happen again. With every legal obstacle finally removed, Ryan restarted construction. This time, the atmosphere felt completely different. Neighbors who had once believed Rebecca's lies visited the construction site to apologize. Some brought lunch for the workers. Others donated flowers, trees, and landscaping materials. Retired carpenters volunteered to help build Ryan's front porch. Electricians offered discounts. Local businesses donated supplies. The project slowly became a symbol of unity instead of conflict. Week after week, Ryan watched his dream take shape. The foundation became walls. The walls became rooms. Large windows overlooked the surrounding countryside. A beautiful stone fireplace was installed in the living room. The wraparound porch his father had always wanted stretched across the front of the house. As construction neared completion, Ryan often stood outside after the workers left, quietly remembering the promise he had made years earlier. His father had believed that honesty always outlasted corruption. Ryan finally understood what he meant. Several months later, the house was finished. Friends, neighbors, construction workers, county officials, and members of the local media gathered for the grand opening ceremony. A long blue ribbon stretched across the front walkway. Ryan looked around at everyone who had supported him during the hardest months of his life. "This house," he began, "isn't just made of wood, stone, and concrete." He paused. "It's built with perseverance. It's built with truth. And it's built on a promise I made to my father." The crowd applauded. Ryan slowly opened the front door. Inside, the first thing he carried into the house was a framed photograph of his late father. He carefully placed it above the fireplace. For a few quiet seconds, he simply looked at the picture. "We did it," he whispered. Outside, children played in the front yard, while neighbors laughed together on the porch. The same land that had once been surrounded by arguments, threats, and police vehicles had become a place filled with peace. Months later, people throughout the county still talked about Ryan's story. Not because he had defeated the HOA, but because he had refused to surrender when powerful people tried to take away what legally belonged to him. Every person who drove past Ryan's beautiful new home saw more than a house. They saw a reminder that truth can be delayed, but it can never be buried forever. And whenever someone asked Ryan whether the long battle had been worth it, he simply smiled, looked at the home his father had once imagined, and answered, "It was never just about the land. It was about protecting a family's dream."
Subscribe the channel and press the bell icon for new updates.